Hey everyone, Carl here with Literate Lessons, and we're back with another deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at a duo that kind of fell flat at Orlando and had been putting up very decent results in Series 1 and hasn't really done the same in Series 2. A lot of what's changed for Indeedee and Armarouge is hard to track down because if you look at the format overall, there's not a big difference. Certain threats are different, but there's a few things in particular that has happened since Orlando that have kind of pushed Indeedee and Armarouge out of the format. Starting by looking at some example teams of Series 2 versions with Indeedee and Armarouge, we see a lot of Terra Grass Armarouge. This is super duper common for things to just like avoid ground type attacks, avoid water type attacks. It's a very strong Terra type for most fire type Pokemon. Adding the ability Flash Fire, Armarouge becomes a very hard to take down target outside of Terra Ice Bundle or Terra Flying Tyranitar. Pairing with that, Indeedee makes it very hard to stop a Trick Room from going up. One or both of these Pokemon can carry Trick Room, which makes it very hard to eventually stop because you, as an opponent, have to kind of guess who is going to be setting the Trick Room, what needs to be stopped for this one, and Indeedee, in turn, limits a lot of the plays that you can make alongside Armarouge. With Series 2, we got all the added Paradox Pokemon, and this example here is playing 4 other Paradox Pokemon on top of Indeedee and Armarouge. Fluttermane, Iron Hands, Iron Bundle, and Brute Bonnet are probably the top tier picks for Paradox Pokemon, and a lot of them play well with the Indeedee and Armarouge type of game plan. Iron Bundle and Brute Bonnet help finish out your Fire, Water, Grass core with Armarouge. Brute Bonnet answers a lot of the dark types that can be a problem with things like close combat. It answers water types with Bullet Seed. Iron Bundle offers speed control and gives you an access to attack opposing grass types if you need to. Iron Hands is another way to beat up those pesky water types. Also, usually can carry Stomping Tantrum and can be a very big problem for things like Tyranitar and other Pokemon to deal with. And then Fluttermane is just a secondary sweeper in this team for the most part, being able to use Dazzling Gleam and Shadow Ball with its very, very high special attack and push damage through, which is part of the problem that Indeedee and Armarouge can kind of run into sometimes, is your damage when it comes to Expanding Force can be lacking depending on your opponent's Pokemon on the other side, and Armor Cannon lowers your defenses, and so you're really reliant on that Indeedee Follow Me to kind of keep your Armarouge alive throughout the game. This second version leans a little bit more into the Trick Room aspect of Indeedee and Armarouge, playing things like Hatterene and Torkoal. Torkoal, notably, boosts our Brute Bonnet's attack, I would assume. Most of the time, Brute Bonnet's attack is the highest stat, which would get boosted by Photosynthesis, making our Bullet Seeds hit harder, our Crunches hit harder, and so on and so forth. Torkoal also is a very good check to the scary Steel types for things like Hatterene. And all around just makes a very good Trick Room sweeper. Again, Iron Hands is very, very strong. Hatterene, being that Psychic Fairy type, answers our Dark types that can be a problem for Armarouge, and it kind of just makes sense on how things work. This example is going back to the tried and true Wide Guard strategy, which I think is something that Armarouge players kind of need to get back into playing. When we talk about threats here in a minute, we'll explain why. But overall, these Armarouge teams are either very hard into Trick Room like you see here, or are just like a Trick Room mode for more middle offensive or hyper offensive teams like we saw in the previous example here. And overall, I think Armarouge and Indeedee might need to go through a little bit of a metamorphosis to stay relevant in the current format. With Series 2 came some pretty big changes to the format. We have a lot of extra ground type coverage in this format that is very, very powerful. Great Tusk being the primary offender here, being able to carry things like a Focus Sash, if I could type here, and being able to spam Terra Ground Stab Earthquake into an opposing Armarouge and Indeedee lead is very, very scary for that lead. If you're not carrying Wide Guard, it will most likely blow you up. Not to mention, it also gets the move Headlong Rush, which is just a close combat for ground types, and it is just as powerful, if not more powerful, when you get to add that Terra Ground. You also get to carry close combat, which almost always is a safe hit if you think that they're going to Terra, which 9 times out of 10 that Armarouge is either going to get out of dodge or Terra in front of you, making Great Tusk a very, very solid check into those Indeedee and Armarouge leads. Not only are you able to abuse the fact that you're forcing a Terra out super duper early if you have that Earthquake threat, you can also just put incidental damage on that Indeedee and then use your second partner Pokemon to take out the Armarouge in return. It's a very, very powerful Pokemon alongside things like Talonflame, Goldango, and stuff like that. And so Great Tusk, I think, is one of the primary reasons that Armarouge and Indeedee really struggled in Orlando. The other half of that coin is the Tyranitar teams that popped up. Tyranitar, being that rock and dark type, is a very big problem for Armarouge to deal with. Not only do you get a special defense boost, so you're really hard to hit, Armarouge can only hit you with Armor Cannon, which lowers its defense and special defense in front of T-Tar, who is likely Assault Vested and is carrying decent coverage moves to beat up Armarouge. Think Rock Slide, Crunch, or Assurance. You also have access to Terra Flying Terra Blast most of the time with this set, and the normal Terra type for Armarouge is Grass, because you remove your fire weakness and essentially open yourselves up to only having a few handful of things. Tyranitar wants that flying type anyway and just gets to carry Terra Blast and be super duper safe this way. Not to mention all of that aside, you do have the ability Sandstream. It chips away at Armarouge, who are normally carrying Life Orb, and you don't really have a good way to keep your Armarouge healthy, and so that extra chip damage really does matter when you're taking extra damage from your Life Orb to deal damage in return. Another big change in the Series 2 meta is the prevalence of Intimidate starting to come back into the format. Things like Arcanine and Gyarados have been doing very, very well here as of late, as people have dropped Clear Amulet on their Mons in cases for things like Life Orb, Sashes, and in the case of some other physical Mons, maybe an Assault Vest. With all that said, Arcanine makes a very good check into an opposing Armarouge and Indeedee lead, because you can sit there and spam Snarl in front of both of them, and unless the Armarouge is ready to click Wide Guard for the majority of the game, you're not ever really going to be in a position to deal with this Arcanine effectively. This is another situation where things like Terra Water Arcanine can be a very big problem for an opposing Armarouge. Your only real damage is Expanding Force, and if you're having to click Expanding Force into a water type, you're not doing as much damage as you probably should be. Armor Cannon is your big single target move that you want to use. Arcanine resists it on both fronts, whether it's fire or the Terra Water. And so Arcanine can easily deal with an Armarouge between Snarl, Extreme Speed, not Expanding Force, and maybe even using some of its own moves like Play Rough, Psychic Fangs, and things like that. It's very hard for Armarouge and Indeedee right now to deal with a lot of these threats, and it's really very reliant on the team to kind of help put itself into that position of, I can actually apply pressure again safely without risking losing one or both of my Pokemon. So what do we need to do to fix Armarouge and Indeedee? What can we do as team builders to help make this duo a little bit stronger into all the scary spread damage in the format? Well, the first big change is putting Wide Guard back on your Armarouge. This is very, very important to have, mainly due to the fact that Earthquake is still very scary for your squad. A lot of times, Talonflame is going to be sitting next to that either Great Tusk or other Earthquake user, and if you can stop the Earthquake from hitting you and then be able to take it out with Indeedee using its Dazzling Gleam or other coverage moves, it's very, very powerful alongside that. That all being said, it's not the end-all be-all. You do lose a lot of pressure because a lot of your damage is in this Armarouge. You're going to be investing a lot more in special attack than you would be in, say, speed or any of your defenses. On the flip side, you do have access to the item Covert Cloak on these sets. What this does is it ignores the snarls that Arcanine can dish out for you. If you're immune to that, your expanding forces are going to actually deal significant damage still. Which means you can actually probably 2 or 3 shot that Arcanine instead of slowly whittling it down by 4 or 5 hit KO. On the Indeedee side, a lot of Indeedee have started not playing the Trick Room slot over for things like Helping Hand or Heal Pulse. I think having both Pokemon to have Trick Room is very, very important. On the flip side of that, you might be able to start dropping Protect for Healing Wish, Helping Hand, or whatever other support move you want. I think your Indeedees are going to have to start being more of the sacrificial lamb, take a hit and go down kind of situation, rather than try to keep your Armarouge alive for as long as possible. One of the other benefits of Covert Cloak Armarouge, that's a tongue twister, is you are incidentally immune to Fake Out, because you can no longer be flinched on that turn 1. So that opens up the door immediately to more powerful leads besides Armarouge and Indeedee. Are you scared of that Great Tusk? You can now lead Armarouge plus Bundle and not have to worry about the Fake Out from your opposing Iron Hands coming into your Armarouge or anything like that. And you can start setting up some more situational leads instead of being very telegraphed with Armarouge and Indeedee. Overall, Armarouge and Indeedee, I think, can be a very powerful force in this meta. It's just going to require proper setup, and I believe you're going to have to gravitate away from the very hard, heavy-handed TR teams like we are akin to seeing with Torkoal, Hatterene, and the like. Something very close to the example 1 we had today, having access to this fast mode of Bundle and Flutter Mane to kind of put pressure on your opponents early, and then maybe lead in with an Armarouge and a Brute Bonnet in the back, or an Armarouge and Iron Hands, depending on the opponent's team, to kind of get you into that I just need to pick up a few KOs now type of situation. Armarouge's signature move Arm Cannon means that you really don't want to be using that as often as you probably are in the early game, and it leads you to a more pivot heavy kind of play style, whereas things like Flutter Mane and Iron Bundle can definitely help deal the damage that you are wanting with that Armarouge, while also being able to protect Armarouge and cover for its weaknesses. Again, if you like what you see, make sure to do all that fun YouTube stuff for us. Like, comment, subscribe. It helps us out a lot. Make sure to come back next week for another deep dive. I believe I'll be covering OCIC meta. That is the current tentative plan, if we don't cover it all in the podcast first. And hopefully we'll see y'all next week. Bye, everyone.